war story. Please let's join my hands together for him.
Yeah, thanks a lot for the kind introduction. Yeah, I'm Faktanetsky, and I'm talking about a website called Unterkunftukraine.de. Unterkunft is accommodation. And yeah, let's just jump right into it. So imagine you have to leave your home, you have to leave your friends and probably even parts of your family behind. And imagine that you don't even know when or if you ever will come back, and you don't know what you will find when you come back. There's definitely many stories about refugees leaving Ukraine and experiencing their way of how to handle that situation. And it's really hard to comprehend this whole situation. And when you think that you kind of get a grasp of how that might be and how that might feel and what it implies for each individual and each family, then you should also keep in mind that you have to multiply that sorrow by 6 million. Because this is about the number that left Ukraine in the past couple of months. And this in itself is a number that is pretty hard to comprehend, right? It's a vast number of people that each and every one has their own story. And yeah, it's hard to find the right words to describe the situation for each of them. So let me talk a bit more about some numbers to give a high-level picture of it. So we have 6 million, as I just said, who left Ukraine. That's about 15% of the entire population of the country. About 3 million of them moved to Poland, and about 700,000 moved to Germany. And how do they move and travel? Most actually travel by train. Some go by buses. There's a couple of different ways. And yeah, most railway companies within all of Europe actually offer their transportation services for free in this situation. And yeah, where do they move? So many refugees have some relatives, for instance, in Poland or in other countries that are close by. So they would move there. But of course, not everyone can do that, and not everyone has the chance to accommodate some friends from Ukraine. So many also just travel into some country and hope for the best, pretty much. And most of them then usually arrive in so-called arrival centers. So that's some places built up for that purpose, where there's really many people in one large place, like football stadiums or what kind of things, where they have many people being accommodated. And some also move through private offers. So private people offering their home or a house that they have for refugees. And some also at some point move from such an arrival center to such a private offering. And what this talk is about is this very last point, and a tool that was set up to make this process of giving refugees the chance to move to a private accommodation easier and more manageable. And this is what this website was set up for. It's called Unterkunft-Ukraine.de. And it's a relatively simple website. It was set up right one day after the war to Ukraine started. And it just collects offers and seekers. So I will show you in a minute how this looks like in detail. And it was created by Elinor and Gut.org. This is some non-profit organizations. and many, many supporters. And I'm telling this story from the perspective of one of those many supporters that joined in a bit later. And I will now tell you what this is about, how it was set up. I already told you to some extent why it was set up. And we'll go into also a bit of details what worked well and what we did mess up and all these kind of things. So this is a glimpse. If you visit this website, you can type it in your mobile phone, you will see exactly this page. And it has a lot of like general information about how to deal with the situation. And at the heart of it, it has two forms. One is about making a request as a refugee. So if you left Ukraine and are traveling to Germany, you can use this form. And the other one is to register an offer. So this is if you live in Germany and you have a room that you can share or even an apartment that you can provide, then you can register it there. And let's just have a quick look at how this looks like. So the left one, that is just this really simple form where you put some general contact data. And of course also some context information of like how many beds you need and what your group or family that you travel with looks like. And then of course a couple of more details that are relevant for making a match and for having the right information in place. And the other part of the form for offers looks pretty similar. So you also just have contact information. And then you have to tell, of course, about your accommodation. So where is it located exactly? What time of accommodation is it? How many beds can you offer? And then once again, a couple of more details. And that's pretty much it. That's this website. So let me tell you about the very first days of this whole thing, how this was set up. So the very first version of this website that I've just shown you was set up right after the 24th of February. So right away, using WordPress actually. And it was just collecting data and dumping it into a database. And people were using Excel to process this data. So they were really just, well, let's look at this data and try to find appropriate matches, call the people from the numbers that they put in, and work that way. And of course, this is really challenging, and it doesn't scale really well, right? You don't have good access control, who can access the data. You can't really make complex filtering of the data to your needs. It's not really streamlined for the purpose. So there was something else that was set up relatively soon, and this is what we then called matching app, so a matching application. So let me also give you a quick view of that matching app. This is also its own application. It's a web application. And as you see in the top right corner, you have a login. So this is really only for people that volunteer to help match the data that was collected by this website. It would be a limited pool of people that can log into it. And the process, the flow is essentially, it starts in the bottom here. So you would first find a seeker either by going just through them randomly and looking which one is someone that you could tackle. Or you can also make a more direct approach by going through a list and adding some filters and then selecting one from there. And then you would like assign that seeker to yourself, so marking it as a seeker that you look into. And then it would show up like this. So you see the data that was entered in the form that I've shown you on the first page. And others would not find that seeker while it's assigned to you, of course. And then the next step is, of course, you want to find a match for that seeker. So you want to find a matching piece of the other form that I've shown you. And if you click that button, you get a screen that looks like this. You have a relatively complex filter on the left-hand side where you can, for instance, specify the city where you want to search for accommodation, and also relevant filters, of course, how many beds are offered in this offer. And then you have a lot of other filters that you may use. And then you can compare your seeker entry with your list of offer entries and pick one that seems appropriate. And then in principle, you would just click this button, make a match, and that would generate an email sending the information of the seeker to the email of the offerer. And I say in principle because it's of course more complex than that. It's not sufficient to just send an email. You really have to talk to the people. So the majority of the work of those matchers that use this application is dialing that number and talking to the people. Of course, first of all, making sure that the person is still looking for a place and that the data is actually accurate. And also, like, there is usually also some text coming with the seeker request or the offer request, asking for details of this and making sure it's really understood what is needed and what is to be expected. And also, of course, on the offer side, you need to make sure that the offer is appropriate in a sense that it fits, right? There were many offers that were like, for instance, some office buildings that were not really ready to actually take in people. And you have to discuss with the person that offers something that it really can offer a place in a proper way. And of course, you then also have to discuss with the person offering a place if this specific seeker that you are looking into is a fit, if they feel comfortable taking this group in. That's about how this works. And now let me tell you a bit about the architecture and the technologies we are using. So, yeah, it's not too surprisingly, we just have a database and a backend that collect the data. And well, as I've shown you, we kind of have two front ends. We have the one that is public, that is just available on the internet, this Unterkunft-Ukraine.de website. And then we have this login-based web application that only the limited pool of matchers can log into and use. And of course, they are connected to the same backend using the same database, because the one works with the data that the others provides. Now let's look a bit more into the technologies that are used. And yeah, when I got into this project, there was an email going around in our company that whoever has some knowledge in web application design should like send a message, and who is interested in supporting this kind of project. And it was talking about, well, we need someone who can program with Svelte, and we need some people who know a bit of PHP. And I said, okay, why not look into Svelte? That's a new fancy framework, let's get into that. And of course I got in the project and people were saying, okay, we really need someone who knows PHP. And well, my last PHP experience was 20 years ago. So I said, well, what could go wrong? So of course, it was a bit of a challenge to get into it. And I was a bit actually positively surprised looking to find that the framework and the whole way of how things are built with PHP and the Symfony framework is very, very similar to similar tools that I know. Like I'm actually oftentimes using Java and Spring Boot, and the the whole way of thinking, how your dependency injection works, how your auto wiring of your component works is in Symfony is pretty much the same as in Spring Boot. The concepts are all the same. Also the object relational mapping, how you extract entities from your database and create models in your backend in it, it's pretty similar. It's all the same concept. So I was positively surprised that I could pretty much just start and know already the principles. And yeah, we use, in the front end, we use Versal for deploying and hosting the applications. In the back end, we have it all set up on AWS, and the back end specifically on Fargate, which is also not too unfamiliar to me. So it's also like other things that I've worked before. And yeah, of course, when you want to use Fargate, you would use it with Docker. And in that well, it was set up with MySQL. Arguably, could have done it with Postgres for some reasons, for instance. Yeah. And everything is set up on GitHub and supported with CircleCI. And this is also was a very good decision to very early on set up like a full CI/CD pipeline using these tools, specifically in this case CircleCI, because it just saves you a lot of human error, and it makes the whole process more streamlined. If you can just like merge a branch on GitHub, and then it's automatically deployed to a test environment, and if you merge it to the next branch, it's automatically deployed to production. That's super convenient to have and saves us a lot of time. Okay, let's move on. Let's talk also a bit about how we organized as a team. So I talked a bit about the architecture of the app. Now let's talk a bit about how we as a team were organized and structured. So this is just a picture on GitHub, where everything is anonymized, of course. But you can see we have sprints, we have a bunch of tickets in here that would like move when a developer grabs it. So it would be assigned to someone, and then we use a review process. So every ticket that goes into the main branch would be reviewed at least once. And then we have a couple of more states for marking if the ticket was already like tested on staging, and if it's already ready for production and will be deployed next time. And we actually deploy relatively often. So we deploy like 2-3 times a week, depending a bit. And yeah, team structure-wise, we are a team of something between 8 and 13 developers, depending on how you count. Why depending on how you count? Because it's a lot of people actually working in part-time, or that started initially and made like a break. And actually, I myself also started in this as a part-time project. I actually started this in my parental leave, where I would just say, okay, here I am. I can help with some features, but I cannot like do it as a full-time job. And I was actually very happy when my parental leave actually ended, which was just 1 month ago, that my company Accenture said, this is an important project. We want you to continue working on that, and we will also pay the bill for it. So they really said, just keep going. We will pay your salary, and we make it as a pro bono project, and just do the thing and keep going. Okay, and yeah, back to like work model and team organization. So as I mentioned, we work in kind of a Scrum way. I say Scrum-ish because it's of course deviating in a couple of points. So what we have is we have a daily stand-up where we kind of synchronize between the developers, the usual thing. We have just 1 week sprints rather than the more usual 2 weeks, which was in particular in the very beginning very reasonable because the requirements and the thoughts, what we need, changed very rapidly in the first couple of days and the first couple of weeks. So it was very reasonable from the beginning to make a very short period. And we also just have one meeting for all the Scrum ceremony things. So the refinement, planning, retrospective, we don't have separate meetings, but we have just one meeting every Wednesday in the morning where we kind of do it all in one. Not a super clean process, so to speak, but that's also a bit due to the fact that many work part-time and many are only available on 1 or 2 days a week. So it's hard to accommodate for multiple such meetings in 1 week. Yeah, as I said, we have about 8 developers, 1 product owner. We don't have a dedicated Scrum Master, but it's more like the team kind of organizes. And what we can really say, what we really did from the very beginning is get to the minimum viable product in the fastest way possible. I mean, it took 1 day until people could throw in data and then iterate and improve. And this is, of course, also a challenge, right? The first days, it was, well, it was set up and it was completely unclear how many people would actually use this platform. And it kind of spread like a wildfire, and people were just joining in, spreading the word about this platform. It got covered up by media. The German government said, yeah, we will also link this on our official pages, and it's supported by the German government. So it was after like a couple of days or weeks, there were already 100,000 records for offers for private accommodation in the database. And then, of course, it's a challenge to handle the data and to get people connected based on this data. Because if the data is lying around, it's not doing anything. So, and yeah, let me talk also a bit about specific challenges that we were facing and how we try to mitigate those. So, of course, time pressure is a challenge that we had from the beginning, and it's contrary to many other projects where you have like stakeholders that would say, please do it quicker. It's more like, if you think of the first couple of slides that I put on, it's more like coming from the inside of every developer. You know what is at stake, you know what this is about, you know why you do that, and that creates like your own time pressure and your own motivation to act quickly and do the relevant things. And at the same time, however, and this is kind of a tricky mixture, security is super critical in this case. Because you have hundreds of thousands of records of private personal data with a high abuse potential. I mean, it's people writing down this and this place I don't use at the moment so much. That could be abused, and it's a lot of emails, and also it's on the other side, it's also very vulnerable people. It's very important in this context to make sure to have certain measures against human trafficking and other illegal activities, and we saw from the very first days that people would try to profit from this organization using illegal activities. There were people going to the train stations and offering people money to come with them and whatnot. So it's really critical how to handle this data and how to deal with everything. And yeah, at the same time, we had frequent team changes. So I mean, we are now like 3 months in, and it was about 3 entire team changes overall. So of people that joined, worked a bit, helped, and then had to move to another project I mean, it's natural that at some point you cannot forever just be in the lucky position. You may be in the lucky position, but most people would just need to move on to another project and do something else. And also part-time work. I also mentioned that already. it's quite a challenge to have this combination, right? And now, of course, it's tempting to say, okay, but we have these cool solutions, so it was no issue. But you will see on the next slide that there is more to it. So some solutions are to have well and clean documented processes and tools. But of course, if you build your website, like after one day, it's impossible to have everything documented perfectly and have all the tools set up the perfect way. So it's still a challenge. And also Scrum, when I got into the team, I was actually super amazed how little time it took me to understand the organizational structure of the team and how work would be organized and broken down. Because everyone in the world uses Scrum, uses tickets, uses stand-ups, uses in-progress status of a ticket, uses reviews, uses Git. It's all super standard. It's actually, there's surprisingly much more standardization in how we organize as software teams than in how the tools that we use, like programming languages, frameworks, are standardized. So it's actually pretty cool that our whole way of how we organize as developers is so well known and so standardized. Yeah, also a point that I can't stress enough, review all code. It sounds sometimes at first sight like review, okay, that probably goes against time pressure. It takes time to do a review, but the opposite is true, because any review will help onboarding new developers. It will also help the reviewer to understand more about how the code can work and how it cannot. And if you, with one review, find a bug that doesn't make it to production that you don't have to fix in a weird workaround way, you already saved a lot of time. So it actually, I always insist on doing reviews. In particular, if you have a relatively new team, you should focus a lot on reviews to get them all on the same page, get them all efficient, and get them up to speed. And then, yeah, automation of testing and deployment, I already mentioned, we had that very early on, and it just gets a lot of weight off your shoulders and makes you much more quick in iterating, in putting in new features, and having little worry about deploying. And yeah, as I said, we deploy most of the time, multiple times a week. So it's always good to have, with every shipping, very small number of things that you introduce, so as little things that can break simultaneously, and if there is an issue, you immediately know where it comes from. And then efficient communication. That was, in particular, in the very first days, a challenge, because there were new requirements coming in every day, new aspects that we have to introduce into our applications. And I was very amazed how well people were all aligned on the same page, and also, in some cases, saying nothing, just not putting up a point, because they know there's other things that are just more important at the time. So, yeah. And of course, as I already spoiled, that's not the end of the story. It wasn't all just going well and fine. There's also some things we messed up. And yeah, one thing, database access security. So at some point, already a bit later into the project, we thought about security and how our systems are protected. And we figured, well, for this one tool, we want to introduce two-factor authentication, because it's a database with hundreds of thousands of records of private data that is highly abusable. So let's set up two-factor authentication. And then one of the developers looked into it, how to do it, and a bit later wrote a message to me saying, well, Falk, there's a user in our system that is called admin, And as the name suggests, has full access to the system. And, well, its password is admin. Which shouldn't happen, right? Luckily, we were able to show or to see from our tools that this user account was only used 3 times, one in the very first setup, and then 2 more times when this person was looking into it. So we were sure that no data was actually stolen or manipulated or whatever. But it was quite a mess up. I mean, that's something that you don't want to have. And we looked into it, how it happened. It was actually that this was set up on a staging system. And you think, well, it's a staging system. Let's just set up the standard user with the standard password. What could happen? There's no relevant data in it. And then people changed. Someone else migrated the user database to the production system because, well, we already set up everything in staging. Why not migrate it to production, right? And then you have the same user in production. So yeah, that happened. And yeah, we were really, really lucky that that was not a major incident. But yeah, I mean, that's something that you really should avoid. And I will come to the point how to avoid such a thing and why we messed it up. Then downtime to data cleanup. At some point when we were already super stable and we didn't have so many downtimes, I got to my computer and they were saying, well, we get messages from all the call centers saying we can't access the application and it says seekers table missing. And as I told you this thing, there's these 2 forms and one goes into the office table, the other goes into seekers table. And I thought, well, okay, this is probably the first table it looks at, and then for some reason the connection is broken. Okay, then you look, okay, we did not make a release yesterday evening. Then you write into the development chat, anyone has a clue what we changed? Because if there was no release, and turned out, yeah, someone has been cleaning up some data in the production database and apparently cleaned a bit too much. And it was a very junior person that got access to the database and really literally dropped the seekers table. Made a backup before and thought, well, let's continue tomorrow. And well, you can't blame a junior person for being junior. So it's not really her fault, but it's actually what went wrong is the onboarding was completely missing. Point 1. So when we later talked to her, she said, I didn't even know that this is like used in production by actual users. I thought this is like a non-productive database that's just used for data analysis, and I thought I can just continue the next day and no one would even notice or be aware of it. So the problem was the onboarding. The person wasn't even aware, and the problem was in our processes. Why does someone who isn't onboarded properly get read-write access to the production database? And we actually made a process around it a bit later that we have a migration script that should be set up in code, so it's also documented, and it should be tested on the staging environment first. And only if that all is fine and a review has happened, we also do it in production. And that should have been there much earlier and would have avoided this issue. And yeah, downtimes after releases, that's not too surprising. In the very early days, there were many downtimes. You do a release, you break something, you forgot to set up a parameter in the environment. It works in staging, but in production, the parameter is missing, whatever. That's not so much of an issue, because if you know how to fix it relatively fast and you have an idea, it's not that big of an incident. So that's manageable. And I think it's a trade-off how much you accept that you sometimes break the thing and how much effort you put into making really, really sure that it's never breaking. But I think that was on an okay level. And then spam is also a very interesting story. Well, if you have a form in the open internet, what can possibly go wrong, right? Of course, it was already 20 years ago that when you have a form in the internet, there will be some bot finding that form and putting random garbage into it. And we had like 5,000 entries being put in our database that were really just spam because we were missing a captcha that would like check that you are a human and not a robot. It was super easy to clean it up from the database because they were all on the same pattern. That was not the issue. But it's actually the main issue that came with it was that we have it all on AWS, and they automatically detected that we had too many emails being not deliverable and shut down our email service. So we had our whole system not sending emails, and we had to clean up that mess. So figure out from the database who should have received an email, and then send like the emails that have not been sent after the fact and all these kind of things. So it was kind of a mess, but yeah, that's just something that happens, right? If you don't think of these kind of things when you design your form, you don't have it. I mean, yeah. In the aftermath, it's always easy to criticize it. And yeah, what are the common patterns that you often see in these kind of incidents? It's oftentimes multiple people involved, right? Remember the thing with the database access. One person does something in staging where it says, well, it's staging. I can do whatever I want in staging. And then someone else picks it up and moves it to production without knowing that it is there. That is a challenge. Then, and what is the learning from it? Of course, you have to, when you do something, also account for the possibilities that others also make small mistakes. So you can't say, well, it's unsecure, but it's only in staging. You should say, well, it's unsecure, I shouldn't do it. I should always use a secure password for access to any database, right? And also when moving from staging to production, you should double check that no one did something weird in this database. Maybe we should not even do this whole thing. We should just set it up from scratch and make sure it's proper. Yeah, that's things that can happen. And one thing that also kind of mitigates these things is reviews. If you have someone making a review, there's a good chance that this person will say, well, you should not create a user that has admin as username and password. And then unstructured processes. Yeah, if you have a well-described process, how to do changes and make sure that there's a review, all these kind of things, of course, help to avoid as much as possible such things happening. Okay, impact. So let's get to the good story. We have this is already a bit old. This numbers. We have 32,000 refugees that really found an offer through this website. So that really got a bed in a private accommodation. But this is quite an achievement, and I have to say I'm really proud to be in a project that achieved such a thing, right? It's 32,000 stories, right, of people that would otherwise probably be still in like some of those arrival centers, and it has a lot of impact. And yeah, it's spread over all of Germany. It's 150 cities that have welcomed refugees using this tool, and it's the number of people offering places is also incredible, right? It's 360,000 beds that have been offered through this platform. That's quite a number, and most of it came the first couple of weeks. People were really eager to say, okay, we need to help, we want to help, please make it possible. So this is, yeah, I can only say it's amazing numbers, and I'm really happy to support this whole process. Yeah, what happens next? Platform-wise, there are quite some developments. There's like a major relaunch plan for some time in the future, but it's still kind of under negotiation and under discussion what will be done exactly. And of course, for refugees, it's much of a bigger question: what happens next, right? And this is, of course, something that we cannot really answer. Everyone has its own story, and everyone has its own things happening, and yeah, it's not only a challenge of finding like private accommodation for people, but there's actually like hundreds and thousands of other initiatives around the whole issue around refugees and helping them finding a spot in Germany and getting along with being here and getting like kids to school, getting like maybe a job and all these kind of things. There's so many initiatives that I did not talk about that happen. And the only thing, like, I mean, one has to focus on something, and the only thing one can do is try the best and do all you can to, yeah, help make the best out of the situation for refugees. And I would like to end with an email that we've got. I changed the names. I will not read it out, but I will leave it on the screen, of some person that took in a person from Ukraine and actually reported a very positive feedback that they really got close friends. And I will leave it on the screen in a minute so you can read it. But with that, I would like to thank you all for the attention. Would be very happy if there's the one or the other question.
Thank you so much, Falk, for that presentation. So right now we're going to take the Q&A, and I will just look in the app to see if we have any questions. All right, so we have a couple of questions here. And then afterwards, if we have time, we'll be able to take questions from the audience. So the first one, okay. Are you thinking of making this an open source project?
It's a good one. To be honest, I'm not 100% sure what is planned there exactly. The thing is, the very first setup of this application that was written in PHP in the backend was based on a software written by Elinor. So we had like that was kind of making the whole process starting much faster because we had like a template to build on. It was an app that had kind of similar requirements and was used as a starting point. And for that reason, of course, it was very helpful, but at the same time, for that reason, I mean, they did not make it open source when they write it. They were kindly making it possible to use it. But for that reason, it's not super obvious if one can just make it open source. So yeah, I can't completely answer that question.
Okay. Another one. Why did you decide to have manual instead of automated testing or automated matching?
Matching. Yeah.
So why is it manual instead of automated?
Yeah. So there's I would phrase it like that. Of course, we want to do as much automated as possible just to make it efficient, to save time for the people doing the matching because it's a lot of work. And we also automated quite some processes. But the actual conversation to people and making a connection to the persons that want to offer a place, that needs to be with a human. I mean, it's just not sufficient to send an email and say, okay, you registered online, and well, here's your data, please connect and do the rest with between you, it's just not sufficient. It wouldn't really work well. You have to make sure that you talk to the people and make sure it's an actual match and not just like it looks good on numbers kind of match.
Okay. Another one. Have you thought about offering the system to other similar volunteer organizations as a blueprint? Mm-hmm. So this person says, I feel like many of them started the same, but still facing the system struggles.
Yeah, very good point. It goes a bit in the direction that I said regarding the open source thing. So it might not be like immediately like handed over to like for everyone to use. What I can tell is that it's already kind of planned to expand it, so other countries also can use it, not just Germany. And the system will also undergo major changes still in the future, so it's not super clear at the moment what will happen with it.
Okay. This one is related to probably how you generate income. So it says, has anyone apart from your company paid for this project? And the person says, I guess AWS and other infrastructure that you use is not really free.
Right. So there is some costs that are covered just by raising money, but many of the services are actually got offered for free. So. For instance, I think, don't pin me down on that, but I think that the AWS service that we're using got offered to us for free for this purpose. Also, we are using some identity providers to make sure that we have a measure of preventing human trafficking. So we need an identity card verification process. And also there we have providers that offered for free to use those services. So a lot of that comes for free. The costs of the developers are mostly covered by pro bono projects of different companies. Like I'm actually working for Accenture, they pay my salary, and I'm working for this project without asking for money from that organizations. And this is the model that we had along the project mostly.
Okay, really nice. So let me say, I think we have time for maybe one or two more. So this one says, how did you combine well-taught documentation with ever-changing MVP iterations?
With ever-changing?
MVP iterations.
Yeah. So it depends a bit on what you look at. So for instance, the whole process of how you release something or how you work, you can document that. Most of it just comes down to writing clean and well-documented code. And like, for instance, when you get to a project, something you should always do is make sure that the README contains instructions how to get this running on your local machine. and make it really easy for a new developer to get onboarded, just having a checklist and a README how to do it. And these are kind of things directly next to the code make life much easier. And that's mainly the things that matter. And yeah, anything tools that developers need to use frequently should be very well documented next to the code, ideally.
Okay. So can you talk about which features make use of AWS Fargate? What do you think about it?
Yeah, so the backend application runs on AWS Fargate. So we put it in a Docker container, and the application is like uploaded to Elastic Container Registry and then uploaded to AWS Fargate with auto scaling, and that kind of enables zero downtime deployment and all kind of things you want to have. So it's really just hosting the backend application. Technically, it's actually 3 Docker containers running in each of those containers, and it's 2 Fargate services running in parallel to have it behind a load balancer and have it failover proof.
Okay, so the very final one. At what point were you backed by the government? Did you have any legal implications to consider beforehand?
Can you say it again?
Yeah, so at what point were you backed by the government? So maybe the German government now. And did you have any legal implications to consider beforehand?
I was not so much involved. This was in the very first days. I mean, what I know is that it's got a lot of attention, and then at some point the government just said, well, it looks good. Why not advertise it also on official government sites? And they were not really implying any requirements on us. They were not specifically saying do it like this or do it like that or make sure that you follow this and that guideline. That didn't ever happen.
All right. So if you have any more questions, please feel free to reach out directly to Falk and he'll be able to answer that for you. So lovely hand once again. Thank you so much for the presentation.
Thanks a lot.
All right. So we'll be back here again at 3:45 and the talk would be on 20 million transactions per day, writing data to the world, largest POW blockchain. So see you here, hopefully.
So, because